Hello everyone, today I'm going to tell you a brand new story. You're sitting alone on the floor at 2 a.m. You don't call your dog, and you don't say a word to it. You even try to cry silently so it won't know. But from the corner of the room, it suddenly lifts its head, walks over, and gently rests its head on your lap. It doesn't know what's happening to you either. It didn't hear the phone call that made you so upset. It doesn't understand why you're crying. So how does it know you're not okay? Do animals really sense human sadness, or are we just turning an instinctive action into a story about love and empathy? The scary thing is that the dog may have sensed your emotions before you even realized it yourself. But sensing sadness is one thing. Choosing to stay with you is a completely different matter. Watch until the end of the video, because the reactions of the cat, horse, and elephant might completely change your perspective on animal emotions. Humans often think that emotions only exist within the mind. If we don't express them, others won't know. But for a dog, your sadness isn't invisible. When you're stressed, scared, or distressed, your body immediately changes. Your breathing becomes short and irregular. Your shoulders droop, your facial muscles change. You move slower and make less eye contact. At this time, your body also releases stress-related chemicals, causing changes in the smell of your breath and sweat. You can't see those signals, but dogs can smell them. A dog's world is made up of countless layers of smells that humans can't perceive. They can distinguish people who have just walked down the street, recognize changes in the body, and are trained to warn of certain health problems. So a dog doesn't need to understand the reason why you're crying. It simply needs to recognize that your body isn't the same as it was a few minutes ago. But this leads to a more difficult question. A device can also detect heart rate or stress levels. But the device doesn't know how to walk up, touch you, and stay like a dog. Why would a dog do that? When they hear an unfamiliar sound, dogs often approach to investigate. Therefore, crying might simply pique their curiosity. But in behavioral experiments, dogs don't react the same way to every sound. When humans are speaking normally, they usually don't pay much attention. When they hear a humming or an unusual sound, dogs may approach to observe. But when a person cries, their behavior often changes noticeably. They walk slower. They lower their heads and tails. Some touch their noses to their hands. Some sit close beside them. Some gently place their paws or heads on the crying person. What's remarkable is that they just do this with their owners. Some dogs even approach strangers who are showing signs of grief. There's no shared memory. There's no pre-established habit. Nor is there any guarantee of a reward. There's simply a person crying and a dog deciding to approach. Of course, that doesn't prove that it understands sadness like a human. Perhaps crying triggers a social reflex. But if it's just a reflex, why does that reflex draw it towards the person suffering instead of making it run away? Skeptics offer a rather plausible explanation. Dogs live alongside humans every day. They know how you walk when you're happy. They know your voice when you're angry, and they also know what usually happens when you're sad. Perhaps every time you cry, the room becomes quieter. You sit down longer, you move slower. When the dog approaches, you usually hug or pet it. Over time, it may have learned that when humans cry, approaching them gets attention. If so, the comforting behavior might just be a reinforced habit. But this explanation is still not entirely convincing. It doesn't explain why dogs approach strangers, nor does it explain why they often lower their bodies and become more gentle. If they just want to be petted, why don't they run to you excitedly? Dogs may not understand exactly what you're going through, but they seem to understand that this isn't the time to play. And sometimes, knowing how to change behavior in response to another creature's suffering is very close to what we call empathy. At this point, do you think the dog truly cares or is just reacting instinctively? Comment number 1. if you believe dogs can sense human sadness. Comment number 0 if you think they only react to smells, sounds, and habits. But don't be too quick to assume, because cats can care in such a subtle way that we often don't realize it. Cats are often perceived as aloof and selfish. They don't run to comfort humans as obviously as dogs. But we might be judging cats by their communication style, which is quite different. When their owner is happy, a cat might play more, rub against them, or purr. When their owner is sad, it might not do anything particularly dramatic. It might just lie closer, become quieter, or sit in the same room instead of leaving. These actions are easily overlooked because they are not dramatic. It's noteworthy that cats often react more clearly to the emotions of familiar people than to strangers. It doesn't just recognize a sad face, it recognizes that the important person in its life is acting differently than usual. Perhaps the cat won't comfort you in the way you expect. It might just stay in a cat's way. And sometimes that silence is also an answer. And what about horses? Next, I will explain the emotions of horses. Horses demonstrate an even more complex ability. They don't just look at faces or listen to voices in isolation. They can combine multiple signals to assess a person's state. Imagine a person smiling, but their voice is tense and angry. A horse can sense this inconsistency. They become more alert, shift their gaze, and try to determine which signal is genuine. This means horses don't just react mechanically to an expression. They are comparing information. The face says you're calm, but the voice and body language say something is wrong. After thousands of years living alongside humans, horses seem to have learned to read us in the same way they read members of their herd. They don't understand spoken words, but they can understand eye contact, posture, tension, and the fear that humans are trying to hide. What are your thoughts on how horses react when humans are sad? If you have any comments, please leave them below so we can discuss them. Next, we'll look at how elephants react to the sadness of their group members. Horses demonstrate an even more complex ability. They don't just look at faces or listen to voices in isolation. They can combine multiple signals to assess a person's state. Imagine a person smiling, but their voice is tense and angry. A horse can sense this inconsistency. They become more alert, shift their gaze, and try to determine which signal is genuine. This means horses don't just react mechanically to an expression. They are comparing information. The face says you're calm, but the voice and body language say something is wrong. After thousands of years living alongside humans, horses seem to have learned to read us in the same way they read members of their herd. They don't understand spoken words, but they can understand eye contact, posture, tension, and the fear that humans are trying to hide. What are your thoughts on how horses react when humans are sad? If you have any comments, please leave them below so we can discuss them. Next, we'll look at how elephants react to the sadness of their group members. In elephants, comforting behavior is shown even more clearly. When a herd member is scared, injured, or disoriented, other elephants often come closer. They use their proboscis to touch the face and mouth of the stressed individual. Makes low, soft sounds. Some of them stood around as if forming a protective barrier. It is worth noting that young elephants can also participate. They haven't lived long enough to learn all the social rules, but when they hear cries of pain, they still tend to come closer. That shows that part of this behavior may already exist in instinct. But why would evolution retain a time-consuming and potentially dangerous response? Because with species that live in groups, care is not a weakness. A herd that does not recognize fear will react slowly to danger. A herd that leaves injured members alone will lose important individuals. The ability to recognize distress can help the group coordinate, stay alert, and survive. Empathy, or at least what resembles empathy, can be more than just an emotion. It is also a survival tool. Science can measure heart rate, observe eye contact, monitor body language, and prove that animals react differently to joy, anger, and grief. But there's one thing we still can't measure. That's the experience within their minds. We don't know what a dog feels when it rests its head on the lap of a crying person. We don't know what a cat thinks when it chooses to lie next to its owner. We don't know if an elephant feels anything like compassion. Perhaps humans are attributing their own emotions to animals. We see a touch and call it comfort. We see a gaze and call it concern. But it's also possible we're underestimating them simply because they can't express their emotions verbally. They may not feel exactly the same way humans do, but difference doesn't mean nothing. Let's go back to the room. You're sitting alone on the floor. The dog walks over and rests its head on your lap. Perhaps it senses the tension. Perhaps it notices your breathing and posture have changed. Perhaps the action is simply the result of instinct and thousands of years of living alongside humans. But whatever the reason, the result is the same. You are suffering. It senses something is wrong. It could continue to lie in a corner of the room. It could turn away, but it has come closer, and it has chosen to stay. Perhaps the important question isn't whether animals understand your sadness precisely, but why, through millions of years of evolution, the instinct to approach a suffering creature persists. Perhaps they don't know why you're crying. They don't understand what happened. But in that moment, they know you're not okay, and they decided that you shouldn't be alone. After hearing the whole story, did you change your mind? Comment number 1 if you believe that animals are truly capable of empathizing with humans. Comment number 0 if you think all of that behavior is just instinct, reflexes, and a learning process. Subscribe to the Animal Y channel because in the next video we'll explore an even more mysterious question. Bye-bye and see you in the next video.